actually the one at the scene. So I was the one that was yelling
Talk to
out
me.
to arrest her because no, everybody wasn't doing anything. I was actually the one who called the cops first, and I saw
Thank
them
you.
when they were fighting in the beginning, and I was like, "This is not right." He was slamming her with the door when she was standing in her door frame, not even close to the female on the other side. So she was literally standing on the other side of the road, and the her baby daddy was literally slamming the door on her back. So she went back into her car, came back out, and then this was when the baby daddy walked towards the other baby mama. After this happened, he grabbed her by the waist. She tried to wiggle away from him. Um, the her arm was like literally almost getting free, with his arm around her neck. This time because he was holding her by the waist in the beginning, and she wiggled out. Um, After this happened, he had her in the like almost looking like a headlock to me on the side, and then the other baby mama stated, "I'm gonna shoot you, bitch. Watch me shoot you, bitch." And he stated, "Oh, she's gonna go get her gun. She's gonna go get her gun. Watch, watch." And after this happened, she ran to the passenger side of her vehicle, grabbed her gun, went around, and when um, the mother, who slipped away from him for at least like maybe a good second, as soon as she slipped away, she shot her, and she shot her in the face, on her side, and in her thigh. And I saw him like holding her for a split second. Maybe he was in shock, but after he was in shock, I guess he picked her up, and when she was falling, like a gush of blood fell, you know, like out of her body, and I was like, what the fuck is he doing? Like I don't know. Everybody else sees movies, you know what I mean, and they see put pressure on the wound. Why weren't you putting pressure on the wound? Why weren't you caring enough? This supposedly was your first baby mama, because when I was on the bus, I heard him and her screaming, and she was literally saying, she was like, I just dropped off my fucking baby. What? I just dropped off my fucking baby. Are you guys kidding me? As soon as I got off the 21 bus, and trust me, they got it. You know what I mean? Everything that I literally had to. I wasn't gonna let her die like that. I literally looked into her eyes. That hurt me. She says she dropped her baby off, and you don't know who she is. You know what I mean? And I was like, arrest her. She needs to get arrested. You know what I mean? They weren't even thinking there was another black female cop who came up.
Romeca Meeks wasn't known to the world, but to those who loved her, she was everything. A devoted mother, a quiet fighter, and someone who always put others before herself, Romeca built her life around one central purpose: her child. Friends described her as warm but strong, the kind of person who carried burdens silently while making sure everyone else felt safe. Her days revolved around routines: school drop-offs, meals, laughter, and the small moments that often go unnoticed. But beneath that ordinary rhythm was a deep, unshakable bond between mother and child. She didn't talk much about her struggles, not because they didn't exist, but because she believed her role was to protect, to provide, and to love without conditions. That was her identity. That was her mission. And to her child, she was more than a parent. She was safety. But as with many stories that later capture attention, there were signs, subtle shifts, changes in tone, moments where something didn't feel quite right. The kind of things people only recognize in hindsight. At the time, no one imagined those small details would lead to something devastating. Because Romka wasn't living a story people thought would end in tragedy. She was living her life, loving her child, doing her best, and holding everything together the only way she knew how. What no one realized was that her strength would soon be tested in a way no one could prepare for. And in that moment, when everything changed, her final thoughts wouldn't be about fear. They would be about love. In the next chapter, we'll explore the events leading up to that critical moment, what changed, and what may have been overlooked. If you're moved by stories like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It started like any other day. There was nothing outwardly alarming, no dramatic warning signs, no clear indication that something was about to go wrong. But sometimes, the most life-changing moments arrive quietly. Romeca moved through her day as she always did, focused on responsibilities, her child, and maintaining the sense of normalcy she worked so hard to protect. But behind the scenes, tension had been building. Whether it was personal struggles, external pressures, or circumstances that had been growing over time, something had shifted. And while those around her may not have fully seen it, Romeca felt it. Still, she didn't break. She continued forward, because that's what she had always done. Because stopping wasn't an option. As the day unfolded, small details began to matter. Conversations, movements, decisions, things that may have seemed insignificant at the time would later become central to understanding what happened. And then came the moment. The kind of moment that changes everything in an instant. There was no time to prepare, no time to plan, only time to react. And in that moment, Romeca didn't think about herself. She thought about her child. That instinct, the immediate shift away from self and toward protection, is something only a parent can fully understand. It wasn't fear that defined her response. It was love. When everything came to a head, there was no script. No perfect way to respond. Just instinct. And Romeca's instinct was clear. Not herself. Not her situation. Her child. Those who later reflected on that moment described it as both heartbreaking and powerful. Because in the face of uncertainty, Romeca's priorities never changed. She wasn't asking for help for herself. She was thinking about protection, about safety, about what would happen next for the one person she loved most. Her words weren't long. They didn't need to be. Because what mattered wasn't how much she said, it was what she chose to say. That choice revealed everything about who she was. A mother first and always. Even when time was running out. Even when the situation was beyond control. She held on to the one thing that defined her life, her child. And in doing so, she left behind something more powerful than fear. She left behind a message. A reminder of what love looks like in its purest form. In the next chapter, we'll explore how those words impacted the people around her, and how they shaped the understanding of her story.
And a Mexican short cop, and I pointed out, I was like, the guns in her car, the guns in the car. Why wouldn't you give him the gun if supposedly this was, a self defense? You know what I mean? If it was hey, here's the gun. This is what happened. It was no self defense. I swear to you, it did not look like no self defense. It looked like you shot her because you were just angry or something. You know what I mean? And to me, when she shot her, you know what I mean? And to me, um, when she shot her, it wasn't it. The female that got shot, she wasn't with any gun. She didn't have no weapon, no knives, no nothing. So what was it that frightened you so much? You had to run around your car, go into your passenger seat or whatever the case is, and you reached in to get your gun and shoot this woman. So to me, it was a senseless. They were arguing because she was pulling up, and I guess they ended up parking. Why was her car parked on the sidewalk? Because I seen she ran towards the sidewalk to get her gun, and it was a small black vehicle, and he had a black truck, I think. And literally, he came out of his truck looking like real, like he wasn't like on anything but being like mischievous, like nothing but like what was like he was planning something, you know what I mean? And I called the cops on the first time I called the cops, it was because he was attacking her, you know, and the other girl was just yelling at her, and she was arguing.
When the moment passed, reality settled in. And with it came shock. Those who knew Romeca struggled to process what had happened. The suddenness, the weight of it, it didn't feel real. But what stood out most wasn't just the tragedy. It was her final words. They echoed. In conversations, in memories, in the quiet moments where people tried to make sense of everything. Her focus on her child became the defining part of her story. Because it wasn't just what happened. It was how she responded. Family members and loved ones held onto that, not just as a painful reminder, but as a reflection of who she truly was. A protector, a mother whose love didn't waver, even in the most difficult moment. For her child, the impact would be lifelong. Not just the loss, but the legacy. Because while Romeca was no longer physically present, what she stood for remained. And sometimes, that kind of presence is just as powerful. Communities often come together after moments like this, searching for meaning, offering support, and trying to ensure that the story isn't forgotten. And in Romeca's case, her story became more than an event. It became a symbol of love, of sacrifice, of what it means to put someone else before yourself. Stories like Romeca's don't fade easily. They stay, not because of how they ended, but because of what they reveal. Her final words became a defining memory, but her life was more than that moment. It was built on years of care, effort, and unconditional love. And that's what people began to focus on. Her strength, her dedication, the way she showed up every single day for her child. In remembering her, people didn't just see tragedy, they saw purpose. A reminder of what truly matters. Because in a world often filled with distractions and noise, Romeca's story brings everything back to something simple. Love. Real, selfless, unwavering love. The kind that doesn't disappear in difficult moments, but becomes even stronger. Her child carries that legacy forward. Not just through memory, but through the values she lived by. And for those who hear her story, it becomes a reflection point. A question. What would we choose to focus on in our final moments? Romeca answered that question without hesitation. And in doing so, she left behind something unforgettable. At its core, Romeca Meeks' story is not just about loss. It's about love. A kind of love that doesn't need time to think or words to explain itself. It simply exists, instinctively, powerfully, and without condition. Her final words weren't planned. They weren't rehearsed. They came from the deepest part of who she was. A mother. And that's what makes her story unforgettable. Because in a moment where everything could have been about fear, she chose something else. She chose her child. That choice speaks louder than anything else. It reminds us of what truly matters. Not possessions, not status, not even ourselves in some moments, but the people we love, the people we would protect no matter what. Romeca's story continues to resonate because it's real. It reflects the quiet strength so many people carry every day, the strength to put others first, even when it's not easy. And while her story is painful, it's also meaningful, because it leaves us with something to hold on to. A message, a perspective, a reminder. If her story has moved you, take a moment to reflect, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful real-life stories that matter.